Welcome to Awaken with JP. I am JP Sears, and I have a question for you. Do you ever get enveloped in the pain of loneliness? Multiply that by, do you ever feel stuck, not knowing what step to take next in your life, especially when you're dealing with the pain of loneliness? Well, this is something I'd like to explore with you today. Why are we exploring this? Well, aside from it being an incredibly relevant topic to the hearts of many of us, I had a question sent to me that I would like to read you that prompted this discussion today. And this comes from Demetria in Serbia. Demetria, thank you for representing your part of the world and tuning in, my friend. I'm very honored by that. That feels really cool. And this wonderful question. So here's what Demetria says. I'm 21. I'm concerned. I don't know what step to take next in my life. I do know that I want to move out of my parents' house. Okay. It goes on, a little more backstory. I realize also I've created a gap from people in order to avoid getting hurt. Creating disconnect from people, which complicates the matters because he says, I want to travel to another country to get a job because of the horrible financial situation here in Serbia, but I'm afraid of loneliness. Therefore, of course, the gap he's created leaves him prone to being lonely when he leaves his parents' house. Makes sense. You with me so far? I'm with me so far. Part of me thinks that. The question concludes, I feel stuck, congested, and my health challenges are definitely related to this. I'd immensely appreciate any tips you have, JP. So, I'd like to pretend for a moment that there's two important inquiries here. They're both super related, but just for a second, let's divide them into, okay, what step do I take, or how do I take a step when I feel paralyzed? And then the second part of this is what to do about loneliness. Now, I think it's one and the same issue. All roads lead to Rome. Actually, all roads lead to Serbia in this case. But for the sake of creating more clarity, definition, and then weaving this together, let's dissect this for a moment. What step do we take next in life? Well, it's beautiful to hear that you've created health challenges for yourself. I would dare say, you mentioned stuck, congested, and the rest of you ever feel stuck and congested inside in your health when you don't know what step to take? So the body accurately reflects how stuck our mind, our emotions, and our psyches could be, or are. Sorry, the bug's messing with the video. It's trying to distract me. It's trying to bug me. That makes a lot of sense. So the beautiful part here is your body's created symptoms to get your attention. You're stuck, you're constipated in your body because you're stuck and constipated in your life. So what constipation tells us, what the wisdom of constipation tells us is any movement is beneficial movement. But when we get into our fearful egos, any movement is scary because we have no guarantee that the next step I take will be the right step. Even if we were guaranteed that it would be the right step, there's no guarantee that that guarantee is actually correct. So there are no guarantees that we're going to take the quote-unquote right step. We'll take a purposeful, serendipitous step, but that doesn't mean we'll judge it to be purposeful and serendipitous. And the other part that we want to acknowledge is there is no guarantee that we won't step into pain. And I think part of this inquiry is I'm afraid to step into loneliness. So with that said, as you are a 21-year-old man, You're at an interesting time in your life. Some people arrive at this time when they're 50, some when they're 75. Here you are when you're 21, I think ahead of the curve if you ask me. You are being asked to be your own champion, your own mountain guide, if you will. It's a necessary rite of passage that all of us come to in our lives. Some sooner, some a lot later. You're on the soon side, my friend. So what does it mean to be your own mountain guide? It means nobody's going to tell you where to step. It means you are exploring the mountain of your life for the first time. You are pioneering your life. No one has ever stepped on the unique mountain of your life before. That's why no one can offer guarantees. No one can say, itch my nose, this is the right step. This is not the right step. Okay, you're going to fall down a crevice there. When we're kids, we have a little bit of a safer environment. You watch a kid, especially when it's learning to walk, exploring the house. It's looking up at mom and dad. It's listening to mom and dad. Because the child is relying on the parents to validate what its next step should be. They're about to walk towards a dangerous part, maybe the actual steps. Mom and dad will say, no, no, no. Or they'll take them by the hand. So the child learns to rely on the guidance of mom and dad. Mom and dad. Whether it's abusive mom and dad or perfect mom and dad. The child learns to rely on them. And then, eventually, we are called to take an emphatic step into the journey of our life. And it means we have to leave home. Therefore, we have to become our own mountain guide. And naturally, along the way, we've learned, well, I don't want to step in pain. Maybe I've done that before, and when I step in pain, it's of course painful. I don't want to do that again. That can leave us very stuck. What constipates us more than anything is trying to avoid pain. And that stuckness shows up in our bodies, certainly. And that stuckness shows up in the more overarching essence of our whole life. Why some people, including all of us, spend time in our life not progressing, not evolving. What stops us from evolving isn't that we don't want to change. It's, even though part of us doesn't want to change, we don't want to step into pain. So here's something my life experience will say that you won't want to hear. You will step in pain. You will do things that you would later then call a mistake. And then later after that, you'll call it wisdom. You'll step in a bear trap. It'll feel very painful in the moment. Later on, you'll look back and you'll call it growth or healing. So don't worry whether or not you'll step in pain. You will. That takes all the guesswork out of it. It will happen. And a lot of times our apprehension, not wanting to take the next step, because we're afraid we might step in pain, the apprehension is our anxiety about not knowing if it's going to happen. So we can listen to some of our own life wisdom that would probably tell us it will happen. So you don't have to have anxiety whether or not it will happen. It will. Doesn't mean it'll be pleasurable. No, it will be challenging. Dimitri, as you are absolutely old enough to think for yourself, please take this as an opinion. An opinion that I think part of me at your age needed to hear. Whether or not it's true for you is going to be for you to decide. And here it is. Any step is better than no step. Stuckness, stagnation, that starts to make us feel dead. It not only starts, but it will create a big volume of depression. Why? Because we're killing ourselves in order to save our life. We won't take a step because we're afraid of pain, which is really, I want to preserve my life. Pain equals a threat equals my survival might be in jeopardy. So along the way, we learn to take no steps in order to save our life, avoid pain, which really means we're killing our spirit to save our life. Maybe you've heard me say in another video or two, to truly live, I believe we have to be willing to be scared to death in order to live. What I'm advocating here is to consider taking a step, allow yourself to be afraid. Don't be desensitized to it. Don't deny it. Don't. I'm telling you what to do. Boy, that's a little goofy of me. My opinion is don't wear a hard shell and pretend like there's no pain, there's no fear. No. Please walk with a courageous yet soft, vulnerable heart to your own challenges that come up, if that makes a little bit of sense. And then you talk about loneliness. I would dare say, perhaps, how this is actually all related, Demetria, is part of you says, I don't want to take a step into my true loneliness. A translation of loneliness, at least in my vocabulary, loneliness really means I feel disconnected. I feel disconnected from the outside world, maybe the spiritual world, and therefore I feel disconnected from myself. And how does that work with all this? Well, you mentioned you have the desire to leave your parents' home, yet you're afraid of loneliness. Makes sense. So I would dare say there's a paradox. We use loneliness to protect ourselves from experiencing loneliness. In other words, we keep ourselves in a very lonely state so that we don't actually have to feel how lonely we actually are. We stay lonely so that we can protect ourselves from feeling a deeper, more intense loneliness. You've heard the saying, does a fish know it's swimming in water? Usually not. Does a lonely person know they're swimming in loneliness if that's all they've ever known? So they're at your parents' house. You're swimming in water. That's the only experience you've known in your living situation. So I would suspect, Dimitri, and this could be completely wrong. It's food for thought for you to consider. I would suspect part of you is incredibly lonely. And the story is, I'm afraid that I'll go out there and experience loneliness if I move to a different country, because I have a gap between me and other people, so I'll just be lonely. Maybe, says the story. The story under the story might just say, I'm already lonely as hell, and I'm afraid to realize and feel how lonely I actually am. And if I stay here in water, if I keep myself the fish swimming in the familiar water that I've always been in, then I'm in loneliness, but I don't know it. So we have to step out of the water we've always been in order to actually feel what that's like, in order to feel how disconnected I actually am. These people, my parents, they've lived close to me, and they live a couple meters away from me most of the time. Yet the energetic, emotional, psychological disconnection might have it that they're 100,000 miles away energetically. That is very painful. Disconnection is the greatest pain that we can experience. Disconnection is actually spiritual wounding. It transcends physical wounding, emotional wounding, mental wounding. It's spiritual wounding. So in other words, when we're disconnected, we're lonely, so we're actually disconnected. That is deep pain. It has cut very deep and touched our spirit. That is very threatening to look at. So, Dimitri, there might be a part of you inside that says, I don't want to take a step. It's not that I don't want to step into the outside world. It's I don't want to step out of this water tank of disconnection that I've been in, because the moment I step out of it, I will realize the water I've been swimming in, the water the waters of disconnection that circulate through my veins. That is a lot to handle. And if any of that's true for you, it is yours to handle. So staying connected to our disconnected, lonely environment saves us from actually consciously experiencing and feeling the loneliness, the disconnection, if that makes sense. There's a proverb that says, the only cure for loneliness is solitude. We have to risk truly being with ourselves in order to cure ourselves of loneliness. There in your parents' home, you're not in solitude. You're in the water that you've always been in. So for the fish, it's got to jump out of the water so that it can not only grow and expand, journey up the mountain of its life, but first so the fish can heal where it's come from. It's past. The years of accumulated pain and scarring, of feeling perhaps very disconnected, yet not feeling that we're feeling very disconnected. Why? Because it's so painful that it's numb. That's my way of taking an educated guess, my friend. It won't be easy for you to leave home. For me, I live my version of this. I left my parents' home when I was 23 years old. And I left their home, moved a couple thousand miles away from Ohio, which is in the U.S., to California. And that woke me up to the waters that I had been swimming in. I left home, and I certainly experienced deep loneliness, honestly, for a long time. It wasn't 100% of all my days, every day, were me feeling enveloped in the overwhelm of loneliness. No, but I definitely felt my fair share of it. Looking back, I don't think my loneliness was created by leaving home. I think leaving home created my sensitivity to realize and begin processing and feeling the loneliness that I accumulated in the first 23 years of my life that I had no sensitivity to. And honestly, in my life today, I would love to say I am always a happy camper. Nope. Sometimes I'm happy. Sometimes I feel very connected to people around me. Sometimes I feel very connected to myself. And I'm realizing I can only feel as connected to me and others as I'm willing to feel the disconnection that I carry inside. in the relationship I have with myself, in the relationship I have with the waters from which I came, my family. So it is very healthy to feel lonely. Let's not confuse that. That doesn't mean it's comfortable. That doesn't mean we like it. In fact, it's painful. So we tend to react to pain and say, oh, pain is painful, therefore it's bad. No, it is incredibly healthy to feel loneliness. Feeling is the evidence of healing. It's how you're processing it, digesting it. Growing beyond your loneliness can only be done through a courageous willingness and vulnerability to feel it. It's very healthy to give yourself permission to do. Another word about my life that may or may not apply to your lives is when I was in my waters, when I was the fish swimming in water, didn't know I was in it, living it in my familiar home environment, I would absolutely have no way of giving myself permission to feel and process and be aware of the full spectrum of loneliness and disconnection that I felt inside. Why? It would have been too scary. I didn't have the resources emotionally, mentally, and the ability to care for myself, to appropriately handle and digest the loneliness. So that's why we go through awakenings in our life, so we can awaken to what's always been there, so that what's always been there doesn't handicap our life. A lot of us look at this beautiful mountain called our life, and we won't journey up it. Why won't we journey up it? Because we're not willing to turn around and look at where we've been. We will only journey as high and far up the mountain as we've consciously journeyed into our past. Journeying into our past, healing the wounds of loneliness and disconnection, has nothing to do with living in the past. It actually has to do with saving our life from the past. Just because we lived in the past doesn't mean we were present for it. Most of us live our childhood in a dissociated, zoned out state most of the time. So we went through it, but we didn't actually live through it. We have to be present in order to live. So we have to go deep into this beautiful, yet scary sometimes, mountain of our past in order for us to create the intrinsic freedom and courage to go high and far up the mountain of our life. Does that make a little bit of sense? So loneliness, it is absolutely not the bad guy. What truly hurts us, if we want to label something the bad guy, in my experience, trying to escape and deny our loneliness, that's what hurts us. Loneliness has great purpose. Proverb, the only cure for loneliness is solitude. Solitude, it's not escaping the outside world, though sometimes we're isolated from the outside world in our solitude. Solitude is solitary with ourself, truly being with ourself. Solitude, the only cure for loneliness. And as we, quote unquote, cure our loneliness, that sounds like it's a disease, something we've got to get rid of. No. In this case, let's say cure is accepting. Solitude is the cure of acceptance for our loneliness. That is perhaps what allows us the freedom to take steps in our life. Being willing to be scared that we'll step on pain. being willing being willing to be scared, that we'll step somewhere, that will actually be far enough removed from where we came, that we'll realize what we've been carrying all this time from the waters that we've been swimming in. So with that said, Demetria, I appreciate you allowing me to offer you some insights for you to consider. It's absolutely an honor to talk about life with you, my friend, and everybody else out there. Thank you for considering all this. When we are in the moment, we call it pain. We call it a mistake. Later on, we look back. We call it healing, growth, and wisdom. Please know those are the seeds that you are planting through your very fruitful practical efforts to move forward in your life. Thank you, my friends. I look forward to talking with you next time. And please feel free to shoot me your questions that you'd like me to talk with you about. I'm more than happy to entertain them. I get to as many as I can when I have time. And also feel free to share this video with your friends, subscribe to my channel, and probably more important than any of that is I'd love to hear from you. Please leave your comments below. What are your thoughts on taking the next step in life? How can you do that? How can you save yourself from the paralyzed enveloping of loneliness? What works for you guys and what hasn't worked for you? There's a lot to learn from about that. Thank you.